We have Kevin Kurz with us from The Athletic here. And first things first, of course, I ask everybody this when talking to him. How have you been killing your time during the quarantine? Any good beer recommendations? Any binge-worthy TV shows worth of note?
I've been sticking to whiskey because it's a little bit, a bottle of whiskey lasts longer than, or in theory, it should. I started watching Ozark, which is pretty good. I also started rewatching The Sopranos, and I made it through 2 seasons of that, and that show really holds up well.
Okay, see, now you're the second one to bring up Ozark. I talked to Jonathan Becker a couple weeks ago. He brought up Ozark. I got 4 episodes in, and did it drag at first, and it gets better? Because I'm like towards the end of season 1. It picked up towards the end of season 1. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So I'm not even through the first season of it yet. Okay, yeah, it was kind of dragging from you, and I love Jason Bateman. Don't get me wrong, but it's like pick up the pace here, guys.
I walk downtown to Campbell. I run into Randy Hahn, and I also see Jimmy Bono. I've run into him a couple times. They both live in my neighborhood here, so have hockey conversations with those guys from 6 feet apart.
All getting takeout from the same places. It's all good.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Well, you've had some recent articles on The Athletic that I want to get into. First off, and this kind of goes with what we were just talking about, just did a piece where Sharks coaches, players were offering their suggestions for takeout. And is there a place that was mentioned to you that you've since tried or planned to based on their recommendations?
I want to try that five line pizza, which is owned and operated by the Sharks team chef, guy Miles McEntee, if I'm getting that name right. Doug Wilson mentioned that place, but I've heard somebody else, another friend of mine, saw it on there too and told me I had to try it. So I'm going to take her advice. So that might be next up on the list.
Was there any place? Because when I read the article, I'm like, how does Bebo's not get a mention? Where there's some.
I know Brent Burns likes that place. He's mentioned that to me before, just in conversation. But he got back to me too late. I shot him a Twitter message, and he got back to me a couple of days too late, so I couldn't include him in the piece. But I know he likes that place. Yeah.
I was going to say, was there any places that you're like, God, I can't believe they didn't mention this place because they're always talking about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I live by the Prune Yard, so there's a couple good places in there. Orchard City Kitchen. I know some of the guys like it in there. I actually think that's a place when Joe Pavelski was back with Dallas. I think that's where they went, a group of them, to Orchard City Kitchen, which is another place that I like.
Yep, love the Prune Yard. Had some good times at Rock Bottom back in the day. Decent beer selection.
Yeah.
Now, you also surveyed Sharks fans on their optimism and their confidence in the franchise and some of the recent decisions. Any surprises in the response there? Did it kind of fall it's about where I thought it would be?
It was interesting. Hurdle, I know Hurdle. I'd have to go back and look. I know Hurdle was the most popular player, which was not surprising to me. I feel like he kind of emerged, especially this season and last season. I think he was the best forwarder on the team last season.
Maybe the whole all-star performance had a little to do with it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Not really surprised about – there was one that surprised me. What was it? I don't quite remember.
Was it that Burns didn't get more votes?
More votes for favorite player? Yeah, I thought Burns was a little more popular, I guess, with the people that I replied. The people that read our site are, and I'm not saying this to gloat or anything, but, the people that pay for our site are the people that I think are a little bit more in tune with the hockey aspect. And I hope this isn't coming across the wrong way, but they're more in tune with the ins and outs of the game itself. Whereas I think there's a big portion of the fan base, particularly here, and I'm not judging, but particularly here, they just want to see the team win. They're not going to follow the ins and outs of the systems or who's on who's playing fourth line wing or, that sort of stuff. So I think our audience is a little bit more in tune with the fact that, Burns didn't have a very good year defensively, especially, and he's never been the most defensively adept player. So that was one that surprised me. Yeah, I thought that more fans might want to see him at forward, because I think that's a conversation you can have. And as a matter of fact, I was talking to another coach who's currently with another team that told me, I thought when they got Karlsson, they were going to move Burns back to forward, and it didn't happen. So that's a conversation that's still, I think, ongoing. And I think, now we're at the point where that's a legitimate conversation, is should you maybe move Brent Burns back to forward next season, depending on who's here.
I was going to say the lack of depth on the right wing almost makes it mandatory to try it, despite the fact that he's, I believe, vocally come out and said more than a few times that he prefers defense. But
he has said that, yeah. And I think people overrate his effectiveness as a winger too a little bit. I mean, he can be a decent winger. He can put the puck in the net, but he, for a big guy, he doesn't play an overly physical game. Let's face it.
Seemed like he used to. I remember some pretty good butt checks back in the day, but it has kind of tailed off.
I think he got hit in the head a couple times. That's maybe backed him off a little bit, which I can understand. But
there's Pierre LeBron telling you the season's starting.
That's nothing important. Are we live?
No.
Live, are we? Okay.
No.
Yeah, so I thought more people, I think it was like 75-25 thought he should be a defenseman. I thought it might be a little bit closer to 50-50.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the one that really got me, of course, was the reevaluation of bringing Erik Karlsson to the Sharks. Mm-hmm. It's no secret, not the biggest Erik Karlsson fan. Comes off as a bit of a diva to me. I'd like to see,
right.
I see a lot of times he tries to make those passes just, I understand he's trying to drive the play, but you see these cross slot passes where no one's home. I don't know what he's thinking sometimes.
Yeah, more of those this season for sure.
Yeah, so, and a lot of people tell me, well, it's far too soon to judge this whole deal. Okay, I respect that, but, what's your take on Karlsson, and when do you think it is okay to finally judge this and say, okay, this was a home run, it was a solid double, it was a strikeout when it comes to this deal?
Well, are we judging the trade or the extension?
That's a great point. I would probably say the extension, because you're making him the highest paid defenseman in the league. Right. And look at all the money that you've got on that blue line. You weren't able to move out Burns or Vlasic. So
yeah. The trade at the time, I think everybody thought it was a good deal. And, I've said this so many times, and I did a radio interview with a St. Louis station today, as a matter of fact. And if Erik Karlsson was healthy last season, the Sharks could have won the Stanley Cup. I mean, the way he played that 6-week stretch between, the late November and first hurting his groin in January was, in 9 seasons here, I've never seen a player play at that level for the Sharks. I mean, he was, as far as I was concerned, he could have been on his way to another Norris Trophy had he kept that up. But then the groin injuries hit, right? And he was never the same. And the Sharks obviously lost the Blues. And, the fact that he wasn't 100% was a big part of that reason. So, had they won the Stanley Cup, obviously no one would ever say that was a bad deal.
Of course.
But they didn't. And, they signed him the extension, and it was a lot of money. And, I remember we did a thing on our website where we asked all 31 of our beat writers to weigh in on whether they thought Erik Karlsson was a possibility for their team. And almost everyone said no, that it just didn't make sense for their team to bring in Erik Karlsson. So, could Doug Wilson have waited this out? Could he have given him maybe a 5-year, $50 million deal on July 4th or July 5th or something instead? We don't know the answer to that. We can only speculate, but I don't think there were going to be a lot of teams I don't think we're going to be any teams willing to give him what the Sharks gave him. Yeah. And the way it was framed a little bit from the Sharks was that Doug Wilson, gave him his word when they made the trade that he would offer him this sort of deal. And, you wonder how much that played into it and Erik even said at the time was that the Sharks stayed true to their words, and they They did everything they said they were going to do, and they offered him all this money. I don't think he would have gotten $90 million from anyone else around the league. And, from the Sharks' perspective, they maybe have to overpay because of the California taxes and all that. But the extension doesn't look very good right now, bottom line. The trade doesn't look very good, and the extension doesn't look very good. And, only the Sharks are privy to his medical records. And that's where I would be concerned first and foremost is this guy came off groin surgery. He has the reputation of maybe coming to camp and trying to play himself into shape, which is going to be a problem for a guy that's now on the other side of 30 years old. So, he's going to have to maybe change his training routine in the summer. And then there are the dressing room questions, and they are valid questions. As much as many people don't want to hear them, there are some valid concerns there, which, we got into a little bit in the piece.
Yeah, I remember Brian Burke talking on Sirius NHL and saying that, he's heard from people that said that there might have been a little bit of a rub the wrong way with some of the guys that, there were guys that made financial or term sacrifice or whatever. They had sacrifice for the betterment of the team, whereas Kane and Karlsson walk in and essentially get everything they want off the hop.
Yep.
And maybe rubbed people the wrong way. And Burke also mentioned the fact that letting go of your captain maybe doesn't sit well with the guys. And now correct me if I'm wrong too. I just want to go back to the Karlsson thing for a second with the contract. The Sharks were the only ones that could also offer him an 8th year, correct?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, back to what I've heard.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I mean, obviously no one could have offered him $90 million, but would there have been a team out there that would have offered him 7 years and $80 million? I mean, the point remains. I don't think that was the case either.
No. But to get back to your points though, I mean, what Burke was saying, and I believe, was it John Scott in the piece kind of did not have the best words about Karlsson?
Yeah, I mean, John Scott went on his podcast and he said that he had dinner with the Sharks. I believe it was when they were in Detroit right around New Year's Eve. And
that was a great game. But anyway.
Yeah. And listen, John Scott is friends with these guys. We all saw what happened at the All-Star game when John Scott won MVP with Pav and Burns there. And, he loves Jumbo.
Yep.
He loves Patty Marleau and he loves Vlasic. Those guys are all close. And I don't know if John thought that maybe no one was going to listen to that podcast or it wasn't going to get out. And, it's what he says is not something that can be ignored, bottom line.
Yeah. And again,
and it's in line with other stuff that, there's chatter about that sort of stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I remember being at a captain's ice, or maybe it was one of the first training camp games at the beginning of this season. And they all seemed, or I should say Karlsson seemed a little more excited about showing off his new like $280,000 Ferrari. The guys were literally streaming out in droves to see this new car. And it's like,
I think I would do the same thing if I bought a $280,000 car though.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't
know all my social media. And listen, it's not. I don't think it's fair to point the finger strictly at Erik Karlsson for the team's dressing room issues, but they were there this season. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I've heard from multiple people that, I had someone tell me they've never heard so much bickering on the bench.
Really?
Someone this is someone that is not. How should I put this? This is a league source. This isn't a Shark source. This is a league source who told me they've never heard so much bickering on a bench as they heard when they were around the Sharks for their games. That was in the first half of the season, but you could see it even from the press box sometimes. These guys just weren't all on the same page, and Bob Bugner's alluded to it. And he said he said the team when he took over was not as cohesive as he thought they should have been, and that was something they worked on in the second half. And listen, this isn't something that I think is can't be fixed. Christ, we're adults here, right? They should all be able to get into a room and figure this out. Taking Pavelski out and giving Kane and Karlsson all that money, did it rub some guys the wrong way? No doubt.
See, I just look at a couple times this season, I'm sure you probably saw it as well, where either Kane had some sort of confrontation with somebody or Karlsson was being challenged, and you didn't see the rest of the guys kind of stand up for the guy, you know?
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that happened multiple times. Whether it was Karlsson and Hoffman in Florida, or Kane, and then that same game, Kane being upset that he got run and nobody came to his aid, and saying that publicly was telling. So and the results on the ice, they speak for themselves. When this team still finished last place in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
You know, we all saw what happened in Game 7 of the Vegas series last year when guys want to play for other guys on the team.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't see that at all this year. And in a league where there's so much parity and there are so many. Again, it's just when there's parity in the league, that you got to find that little extra gear, and this was a team that where that was missing this season.
Yeah, well, I go back to that Washington game as well. Is that the one where they gave up an empty net goal when they had the lead? Like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I blame that more just on some shitty goals that went in.
Yeah, no doubt.
That game was more on Martin Jones, I think, than anyone. I remember I think it was Barclay Goodrow couldn't get a clear, and then the overtime goal. I mean, you go back and look at that. Martin Jones was just. I mean, he was gone at that point.
See, now, do you think? I mean, I don't know if Wilson's gonna go for somebody once everything resumes, but. What I mean, Jones, this is not a tradable contract. How do you solve this? I mean, do you hope Nabby works miracles, or?
Yeah, the one Martin Jones aspect of his game that I think, and this was interesting because I didn't realize this until I was talking to him about it. But he said to me, I've played a lot of games in the last 2 years, or whatever it was, 4 years, and. If you go back, he had played more games than any other NHL goaltender over, I think it was the 4-year span since he got here. And the other goalies in that were, I believe, Braden Holtby and Pekka Rinne, and those guys didn't have very good years either. Yeah. So maybe there really is something to be said about overworking a goalie, playing him too much. Maybe he was just fatigued. Maybe he needed that break, and he did play well going into the shutdown. Those last, he had that shutout. I think it was in Minnesota, and then, his numbers from that point over the final month were pretty good. So, I think they're hopeful that he can come back and kind of reestablish himself. But at the same time, I think Martin Jones and Aaron Dell right now have combined for the worst 5-on-5 save percentage in the NHL over the last 2 years. You got to make some sort of change there. Bottom line. And the change is going to be Aaron Dell. Aaron Dell won't be back here, I don't think. I would be shocked if that happened because, Aaron Dell, for as well as he played during that little stretch, he wasn't very good over the last month from February through March. So, you got to make a change there. He's the free agent. Jones's contract you're stuck with. I certainly don't think you go on to camp with Martin Jones and then a bunch of young guys, including this Russian kid they just signed. I think you got to go out and find another experienced goalie. Probably won't be the sexiest name of all time, but you sign a veteran, who's got some experience on some sort of a cheap-ish 1-year deal.
Well, it's funny because you always hear the goalies, they come out with the cliche, or even you'll see some of the coaches, the more workload they get, they tend to play better or whatever. And it's like, yeah, the numbers really don't bear that out sometimes. And
yeah.
I remember Nabokov having one of his best seasons when he played his least amount of games. So
yeah, especially the way the league's been trending lately. Every team seems to be putting a premium on finding a very good backup, just because it's such a fickle position. You never know. Even the best goalies in the world can have down seasons.
Yeah, maybe it's evolving that you have to have a solid tandem. Was Dallas ahead of the curve with Niemi and Lettinen? Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, and we keep hearing different things, from the NHL regarding resuming this season. Do you think there's any way we see a 2020 Cup winner?
Yeah, I'm not counting it out yet. Who knows? I'm not a scientist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I mean, this thing still seems like it can go so many different ways. Obviously, there's incentive for the league to get it done.
Yeah.
And for the players too, the money wise and the hockey related revenue and all that. So, it's what's today, May 5th. I mean, let's see where we are in a month. Maybe they have some sort of an August, September playoff and then start the season in November, December, whatever it is. I'm certainly not shutting the door on it yet, but I don't think anybody really knows, obviously, including everybody at the league.
Well, John Scott acted like he knew on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. He said something about June 1st, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'm not following John Scott's Twitter for the breaking news. Not that the guy's not connected. Maybe he heard something and misunderstood it, but Pierre LeBrun is obviously our guy at the Athletic, who's all over it. Almost at the time that it happened. So.
Well, and then you talk about the Athletic, and so, I'm a subscriber, obviously, and one of the things that was, I guess, kind of put forth as just a reason to go with it, because a lot of people, everybody goes, wait a minute, you want me to pay for things that were free before and whatnot? Mm-hmm. But one of the things that was kind of a benefit that was sold to people, and so far I found it to be absolutely true, is that the level of discourse in the chat is far better than on anything else. But I know that you also have to deal with knuckleheads on Twitter, and you have far more patience than I do in that regard.
Yeah, sometimes.
But how do you deal with all that? I mean, because you have to write so many articles at a time, and just everybody, of course, wants to put in their 2 cents and tell you how wrong you are.
Yeah. I mean, and our comment section's pretty good. I try to get in there and reply to any stuff that people may have. Twitter, whatever. It's easy to ignore Twitter if you just turn off the notifications.
Yeah, no doubt.
People are passionate, which is fine. Just keep it respectable. It's the only thing. That's, Twitter's kind of a cesspool of society in general. So.
I think you can say that about almost all forms of social media. Speaking of which,
especially when you can hide behind an anonymous,
yes,
whether you're fake this or fake that, or using an egg as a avatar, right? Yeah.
Or one of 20 burner accounts that you have. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing what people can want to write when they don't use their name or their picture. But.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you're saying is we're not going to see you on TikTok anytime soon, I guess.
I'm not even quite sure what that is.
Do you remember Vine?
Yeah, I liked Vine. Vine could be funny.
It's basically the same thing, just longer videos.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Obviously, you can find Kevin's articles on theathletic.com or their app, and find Kevin if he'll have you on Twitter at K Kurz NHL.
Yep. Thanks, AJ.